Hello, my name is Rob Garner. I'm a computer programming instructor, and today I'm going to talk about some commonly used libraries that are imported into Python programs. And the truth is, there's a lot of them. That's one of the benefits of Python being an open source project. There's a lot of contributions out there. You can go to Google and search Python, and you'll find a lot of them. A common one that's used for input is the file input function. We're going to cover that in a later part of this course on how to use file input, but file input is one of them. Another module that's used is to represent time. You really don't want to write your own time code if you can help it. Time is actually pretty complex. You have things like leap years and leap seconds and so that has already been solved multiple times in programming. And so typically to do time, we're going to use a library. The time library is one that represents time as a tuple. And it actually represents it this way. It's a tuple with 9 elements. And the first one is the year, then you get the month, the day, the hour, the minute, the second. And then you actually also get the weekday, the Julian day, and daylight savings. So these things are figured out for you with this library. And so often you're bringing in the time library and doing time with that. And so some other functions that you'll find in the time library is ASC time. It will convert a time tuple to a string. So it will be a string human readable version of that time tuple. So for example, you get Friday, December 21st. And there's some formatting things you can do with it. So you can format your time with that. There's local time. It'll convert seconds to a date tuple and local time. So that kind of goes the other direction. Make time converts a time tuple to local time. And then there's a sleep function in the time library. It allows you to pause the program for a certain number of seconds. And then there's a strip time that parses a string into a time tuple. So this converts a time tuple into a string. This one does actually the reverse. It converts a string into a time tuple, and it gives you the chance to pick the format that string is in. And then the time function will return to you the current time. And it returns it as seconds since the epoch. The epoch is actually January 1970, which all computers consider the start of all time, mostly as a convention because it has to pick a particular time. So that epoch time is actually what converts this local time will convert that epoch time to a time tuple. So there are a lot of useful functions to work with time, and note that we really have kind of 3 main ways of representing time: seconds since the epoch, a time tuple, or as a string that's human readable. And you often have to switch back and forth between them. So this time module fixes that for you. Oh yes, and then time.ASC time, if you put no parameters, it will actually use the current time automatically by default. Then the other library that is useful to use is the random library. Random will return a random number between 0 and 1 as a floating point number. You can also have a bunch of utility functions. Get random bits returns a random bits in the form of a long integer. So this gets you up to a really large random integer. This is actually very similar to basically how C++ does random. And then uniform will return a random floating point number between the minimum number here to the maximum number there. So that's if you want a floating point. Random range if you give it a start and stop number and then a step. And note the start and step is optional. So if you said random range 6, it'll give you a number between 0 and 6. You could also say, give me random range between 1 and 6 to represent a dice. And you can also provide a step as well. So that's often used when you want to randomly select a choice. And then if you have a sequence and you want to randomly select something from a sequence, there's a choice option function here that will do that for you. There's even a shuffle where you can give a sequence to this, and it will actually reorder the things in the sequence in a random order. And then sample kind of does the same thing as choice, but it returns n number of elements. So if you wanted 3 random things from a sequence, you could use sample. So all of those are very useful when you want to do random things with your program. And there's a number of other libraries. difflib enables you to compute how similar 2 sequences are. MD5 and SHA will allow you to do encryption types of things. And then CSV is short for comma separated value. If you need to read a CSV file, this automates a lot of the things you need to do with that. It basically you point it at a CSV file, basically any data file that uses commas to separate things, or tabs, or any other delimiter, and it will allow you to import that in, and it will take care of all the difficulties of converting that into a data structure you can read with Python. So I don't know if it, I think it brings it back as a dictionary, but and then you can just use the dictionary. And then TIME-IT is another time module. Or actually, no, TIME-IT it's a time module, but it's used to evaluate how long your code takes to run. You would think that you could just take a time hack at the beginning of your code running and at the end of your code running, but the challenge is that you have the operating system doing things as well at that point in time. So really, you kind of want, you need something a little bit more specialized that just measures when your code runs. So if you want to assess the efficiency of your code, that's your library. Profile also gives you other tools to assess the quality of your code. Trace module can give you coverage analysis, tells you which parts of your code are executed and which are not, and is useful when you're writing test code. Datetime is an extended time library that gives you more functions than just the basic time library. itertools have a lot of tools for creating iterators. And then logging gives you a standard set of tools for making logs. So rather than rolling your own log functionality, you can use logging. The regular expression library is very useful when you want to validate user input. For example, if you ask a user to enter a phone number, you could use the regular expression library to see if what they gave you was actually in the format of a phone number or serial number or zip code or anything else. And then the shelf library. The shelf library is really neat. If you need to preserve your information, you can use shelf and from one run to the next. You can use shelf to do that rather than going to the trouble of writing a program to store things in a file or a database. It gives you some simple ways of just taking the objects in your program and shelve them, and you'll pass it the objects you want to save, and it will just save it to. It will automatically take care of saving it to a file, and then when you open up your program, you can recover those from the shelf object, and it's a good option if you want to save, for example, user preferences or things like that. So those are some common libraries that are used. Thank you very much.